If you lose your yam, don't expect cassava to fool your tongue. A man once believed he could replace his late wife the way a king replaces his queen, with precision, without emotion, as if love were merely a transaction. But the heart isn't a ledger, and grief doesn't follow orders. That man was Theodore Blackwood, a rancher 39 years old, with shoulders like oak beams, living in Dawson County, Nebraska in 1887. He had buried his beloved Margaret the previous winter. Pneumonia swept through their homestead like a vengeful spirit, taking her down fast, leaving him with 5 children, a debt-ridden ranch, and a house where every room still carried the ghost of her lavender soap. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Keep reading to discover how one woman refused to vanish. Theodore didn't want love again. He didn't think he needed tenderness either. What he wanted was a woman who would fit precisely where Margaret had left off. Same chair at supper, same lullabies at night, same hands folding laundry just so. So Theodore wrote an advertisement in the Omaha Daily Bee. Widower, 5 children, sprawling cattle spread, seeking a wife to replace the one I lost. In every way. The ink was barely dry when Evangeline Morrison read those brutally honest words in her cramped Boston boarding house room. 30 years old, a seamstress by trade, Evangeline found herself fresh out of work after refusing the wandering hands of her wealthy employer, Mr. Cornelius Ashford. Word had spread through the textile district like wildfire. No decent family would hire a woman who'd caused trouble with a respectable businessman. She sat on her thin mattress that night, counting her last savings, $14.37. Enough for maybe 2 more weeks of rent if she stretched the beans and hardtack. The advertisement seemed to burn through the newsprint into her palm. She wasn't fool enough to think this was about love. Theodore's words were plain as day. He wanted a replacement, not a wife. But what choice did she have? Return home to her father's failing farm in shame? That evening, by candlelight, she penned her response. Mr. Blackwood, I am a woman of 30 years, skilled in household management, cooking, and the care of children. I have no romantic notions about marriage, only the practical need for shelter and purpose. I can fill the position you describe. Respectfully, Miss Evangeline Morrison. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a leap into the unknown. What would you risk for a fresh start? 3 weeks later, a letter arrived with $20 for train fare and a note. Come at once. Bring nothing that belonged to your old life. The journey from Boston to Dawson County consumed 4 endless days. Evangeline watched the landscape transform from brick factories to rolling farmland to endless plains stretching beyond the horizon. Each mile carried her further from everything she'd known, toward a man who'd made it clear she was nothing more than a commodity. The train stopped at Lexington Depot on a Tuesday morning in late September. Evangeline stepped down with her single carpet bag, scanning faces for her intended husband. She spotted him before he saw her. Tall as a lodgepole pine, with shoulders that filled out his faded work shirt and hands scarred from years of ranch work. His hair was the color of prairie grass gone brown, and his eyes held the kind of emptiness that comes from staring into a grave too long. You'd be Miss Morrison, he said, approaching with long strides. No smile, no greeting, just a flat statement of fact. I would be, yes. He looked her over like a man appraising livestock, taking in her dark wool dress, her practical boots, the way she held herself straight despite 3 days of travel. You'll do, he said finally, as if she'd passed some test she didn't know she was taking. The wagon ride to his ranch took 2 hours across terrain that seemed endless. 5 children, Theodore said, breaking the silence. Marcus is 17, does most of the heavy work. Christopher's 15, good with horses. The girls are Beatrice, she's 12, and Sophia's 8. Little William just turned 6. Evangeline nodded, filing away the information. They're used to their mama, Theodore continued, his voice going flat. Margaret had a way about her, gentle-like, sang while she worked, never raised her voice, not once in 16 years of marriage. The way he said it sounded like a warning. The Blackwood Ranch spread out before them, a 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, a big red barn, several outbuildings, and cattle grazing as far as she could see. But as they drew closer, she noticed what Theodore's pride couldn't hide. Loose shingles on the barn roof, fence posts needing replacement, a vegetable garden gone to weeds. This was a ranch hanging on by its fingernails. The children waited on the front porch like a small army. Marcus stood with his father's broad shoulders and serious expression. Christopher fidgeted beside him, all elbows and knees. Beatrice had her mother's blonde hair and blue eyes that missed nothing. Sophia hid behind her sister, thumb in her mouth. Little William clutched a wooden horse carved smooth from years of play. "Children," Theodore said, helping Evangeline down. "This is Miss Evangeline. She's going to take care of things now." Marcus offered a work-hardened hand. "Ma'am?" Beatrice moved closer, studying Evangeline intensely. "Are you going to be our new mama?" "Beatrice," Theodore's voice carried a sharp warning. "It's all right," Evangeline said, kneeling to the girl's level. "I'm going to try to take good care of all of you. But I'll never try to replace your mama. Nobody could do that." Walking through the front door was like stepping into a museum. Everything was exactly as Margaret had left it, her shawl draped over a rocking chair, a half-finished sampler with needles still threaded, her gloves beside a small Bible. Family photographs crowded every surface. "This was her place," Theodore said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She'd sit right there in the evenings, mending or reading to the children. Sometimes she'd play the piano." What happens when you're expected to live someone else's life? This woman was about to find out. The kitchen held Margaret's apron on a peg, recipe cards in her handwriting, a moldy loaf of bread under a tea towel. "She made this every Tuesday," Theodore said. "Honey wheat. Used to say the smell made the house feel like home." Upstairs, he showed her the children's rooms, then stopped at a closed door. "This was ours. You'll sleep here now." The master bedroom was exactly as Margaret had left it, her brush and mirror on the vanity, her nightgown laid out on the bed, her shoes lined up beside the wardrobe. "I couldn't change anything," Theodore admitted. "Didn't seem right." Evangeline opened the wardrobe. Margaret's dresses hung in careful rows, day dresses, Sunday best, and a wedding dress of ivory silk that smelled faintly of lavender. "You're about the same size," Theodore observed. "Maybe a little taller." The words hit her like a slap. He wasn't just asking her to live in his dead wife's shadow. He wanted her to wear it. Before she could respond, he pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I wrote this out for you. The schedule." Evangeline unfolded it with numb fingers. Theodore's handwriting marched down the page like iron orders. 5 a.m., wake, put on the blue calico dress. 5:30, start coffee. 6 a.m., wake children. 7 a.m., breakfast sharp, flapjacks on Tuesdays. 8 a.m., pack lunch pails. 9 a.m., household chores, wash Mondays, iron Tuesdays, mend Wednesdays. Noon, dinner prepared. 4 p.m., milk cows and hum, Sweet Betsy from Pike. 6 p.m., supper on table, sit in Margaret's chair. 8 p.m., bedtime routine, sing Rock of Ages for girls, Old Dan Tucker for boys. 10 p.m., retire, wear the white cotton nightgown, braid hair before bed. This wasn't a schedule, it was a script for playing a character who'd already died. "I know it's a lot," Theodore said, but Margaret had everything running smooth as clockwork. The children are used to routine. "And if I don't follow this exactly?" His jaw tightened. "Why wouldn't you? It's what worked." Evangeline folded the paper, feeling its weight like chains. "I understand." But she didn't understand how she could become someone else without losing herself entirely. The weeks that followed tested Evangeline beyond imagination. Every morning she woke at 5 a.m., dressed in Margaret's blue calico, and descended to a kitchen that felt like a stage. The children watched with hawk-like intensity, noting every deviation. When she stirred porridge clockwise instead of counterclockwise, Beatrice cleared her throat. When she hummed the wrong tune, little William looked up with tears. "That's not Mama's song," he whispered. Theodore watched too, his eyes cataloging every failure, every moment she fell short of Margaret's impossible perfection. "Are you settling for a life that doesn't fit?" This woman almost did, until she made one brave choice. The turning point came when she found Beatrice crying in the chicken coop, clutching a hen like a lifeline. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Evangeline asked, kneeling beside her. "You smell wrong," Beatrice sobbed. "Mama smelled like rose water and bread baking, and you don't know our games or our songs or which cup Sophia likes best. Papa keeps saying you're here to take care of us, but you don't even know us." The girl was right. Evangeline had been so busy trying to be Margaret that she'd never learned who these children actually were. That evening, she made her first real decision. Instead of following the prescribed bedtime routine, she sat on Beatrice's bed and asked, "Tell me about your mama." Not the things she did, but who she was. The children looked at each other uncertainly. Then Beatrice spoke. "She used to sneak us cookies before supper when Papa wasn't looking, as she made up stories about the animals we saw. She taught me to whistle," Christopher added. "Papa said it wasn't proper, but Mama said some things were worth doing even if they weren't ladylike. She let me stay up late when I had bad dreams," Sophia whispered. "She'd make tea with honey and tell me about angels." As the children shared memories, Evangeline began to see the real Margaret. Not the saintly martyr Theodore painted, but a mother who bent rules for her children's happiness, who valued kindness over propriety. But when Theodore appeared in the doorway, his face went dark. "What are you doing?" The children scattered. Only Evangeline remained, standing to meet his anger. "I was getting to know them. By filling their heads with memories that will only make them sad, by disrupting their routine, by learning who they are instead of trying to make them fit some perfect picture you've got in your head." Theodore's jaw worked, and for a moment she thought he might strike her. Instead, he turned and stalked away. Some wars are worth fighting, especially when the prize is your own soul. The crisis came on a Saturday evening, when Evangeline faced the green dress with pearl buttons. According to Theodore's schedule, she was supposed to wear it for their weekly family evening, but the dress felt wrong, too tight, too short, cut for a different woman. She looked in the mirror and saw a fraud. Instead, she put on her own best dress, dark green wool with black trim. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. Theodore's face when she entered the parlor could have frozen July. "Where's the dress I asked you to wear?" "It doesn't fit properly." "It fit Margaret just fine." "I'm not Margaret." The words fell into silence like stones into a well. Theodore stood slowly. "You agreed to replace her in every way. I agreed to marry you and care for your children. I never agreed to disappear. Is that what you think I'm asking? What else would you call it? You want me to wear her clothes, sit in her chair, sing her songs, follow her schedule down to the minute. You want me to be her ghost walking around in my body." Theodore's face flushed red. "I want things done the way they're supposed to be done. The way that kept this family together before you." He stopped, but the damage was done. "Before I what?" Evangeline demanded. "Before I disrupted your perfect museum? Before I reminded you that your wife was dead and buried and never coming back?" Marcus shot to his feet. "Don't you talk about our mama that way." "Sit down," Theodore barked. Evangeline looked around at the family she'd tried to join, seeing how they'd closed ranks against her. "I'm going to bed," she said quietly. "Good night, children." The discovery came the next morning while Evangeline organized the bedroom. Moving Margaret's jewelry box, she heard something rattle inside a hidden compartment. Her seamstress fingers found the tiny catch that opened a narrow drawer. Inside lay letters tied with ribbon and a train ticket to Omaha dated 2 months before Margaret's death. Every family has secrets. What Evangeline discovered would shatter everything. Evangeline's hands shook as she untied the ribbon. The first letter was from Margaret's sister Lorena. "My dearest Margaret, I received your letter with great sadness. You have borne too much for too long. 5 children and a husband who sees you as nothing more than a broodmare and housekeeper would break any woman's spirit. You ask if you can come stay with us, and of course the answer is yes. As for Theodore, perhaps a wife's absence would teach him to value what he has taken for granted. You say he barely speaks to you except to give orders, treats you like furniture. That is no marriage, Margaret, that is bondage. I have enclosed train fare. Come whenever you are ready." Margaret's responses painted a picture of a woman trapped in a loveless marriage. "Theodore speaks to me only to criticize. He has not touched me with affection in over a year, yet expects me to warm his bed whenever he has need. The children sense my unhappiness. Little William asked why I cry when I think no one is looking. I have the train ticket. I look at it every night, wondering if I have the courage to use it." The final letter was dated 3 weeks before Margaret's death. "Lorena, I have made my decision. By the time you receive this, I will be on my way to you. I can bear this life no longer. The children will be better off without a mother who resents their existence. Theodore will recover. He always said any woman could manage his household if she just followed his instructions. Perhaps his next wife will be more suited to the role than I ever was. For the first time in years, I can imagine being happy again. But Margaret had never made it to Omaha. Pneumonia had claimed her 2 weeks later. Evangeline sat surrounded by scattered letters, her mind reeling. The woman Theodore mourned so desperately had been preparing to abandon him. The perfect wife whose memory he used to measure every other woman had been desperately unhappy. The bedroom door opened and Theodore stood there, his face cycling from confusion to shock. "What are those?" "Letters from your wife to her sister." He reached for them, but Evangeline held them protectively. "You need to read them, all of them." "I don't need to read anything, those are private." "She was planning to leave you, Theodore. 2 weeks before she died, Margaret was planning to take the children and go to Omaha." The words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered backwards, sinking onto the bed. "That's not, she wouldn't." She was miserable, lonely. She felt like a servant in her own home. Theodore's face went white, then red, then white again. "She never said, she never complained." "According to these letters, you barely spoke to her except to give orders." He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "She always seemed content. Because she'd given up. Because she'd stopped believing you cared about her happiness." Evangeline moved closer. "The woman you've been mourning, the perfect saint you want me to become, she existed only in your imagination. The real Margaret was so unhappy she was willing to abandon everything rather than spend another day being ignored and criticized." "Stop." His voice was muffled. "You made the same mistake with me, tried to turn me into your idealized version of her instead of seeing what was right in front of you." I said stop. He lunged to his feet, fury radiating from him. For a moment, she thought he might strike her. Instead, he swept Margaret's jewelry box off the vanity, sending it crashing to the floor. "She was going to take my children," he roared, "because you drove her to it. Because you made her so miserable that leaving seemed like the only escape." They stared at each other across the wreckage of broken jewelry and shattered illusions. Theodore's chest heaved, his eyes wild with grief and rage and recognition. "God help me," he whispered. "What have I done?" The fight went out of him all at once. He sank to his knees among the scattered trinkets, picking up a locket with Margaret's photograph. "I loved her," he said brokenly. "I know you did. I loved her so much. I know. But love isn't enough if you don't know how to show it. Love without kindness is just possession. Love without respect is just control. I wanted to protect her, provide for her, give her everything she needed. Everything except what she wanted most, to be seen, to be valued, to be treated like a partner instead of property." He looked at the photograph through tears. "She never told me she was unhappy." "Would you have listened if she had? Or would you have told her she was being silly, that she should be grateful?" The accuracy of her guess was written in the shame that flooded his features. "I'm a fool," he said finally. "You're a man who loved his wife but never learned how to be married to her. There's a difference." He turned to face her fully. "And you? Have I made the same mistakes with you? You tried to. But I'm not Margaret. I won't disappear quietly into unhappiness. No, you'll fight me every step of the way, if that's what it takes." Something shifted in his expression. Thank God you'll fight. Thank God you're not her. Thank God you refuse to disappear. This is the moment everything changes. Will you keep reading to see how their story transforms?" The changes began slowly. Theodore burned the schedule, feeding the papers to the kitchen fire while Evangeline prepared supper. "What happens now?" she asked when the last page had crumbled to ash. "Now we figure it out as we go," he said, and for the first time his smile reached his eyes. That Sunday, when Evangeline Morrison, the sharp-tongued leader of the Ladies' Auxiliary, commented on Evangeline not wearing Margaret's dress, Theodore stepped closer to his wife. "Evangeline prefers to wear her own clothes. I think she looks lovely." As autumn turned toward winter, the Blackwood household settled into new rhythms. Evangeline cooked foods the children actually enjoyed rather than following Margaret's menus. She sang lullabies from her own childhood, Irish songs her grandmother had taught her. Theodore began coming home for the noon meal, wanting to be part of daily life rather than a distant figure. "Tell me about Boston," he said one day while she rolled out pie dough. The request surprised her. He'd never asked about her life before Nebraska. So she told him about her cramped boarding house room, about Mr. Ashford and his wandering hands, about the reputation that had followed her. "I was alone," she said simply, "completely alone in a city full of people. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like a chance to belong somewhere. And now, do you belong here?" She looked around the kitchen that had gradually become hers. "I'm beginning to." The first real snow came in early December. Evangeline had never seen so much snow, and her delight charmed the children into showing her how to build snow forts and catch snowflakes. Theodore found them in the middle of an epic snowball fight. She'd lost her bonnet, her cheeks were bright red, and when she laughed at William's terrible aim, the sound carried across the yard like music. "You look happy," he said later. "I am happy." "Even here? Even with us?" She turned in his arms. "Especially here, especially with you." That night, Theodore traced patterns on her shoulder. "I want to give you something, a baby, our baby." The words hung in the air, weighted with possibility. "Are you sure you already have?" "I have Margaret's children. I want yours too." The distinction mattered, not replacement children, but new life born from their own love. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'd like that." By spring, she was carrying their first child. Theodore was different during this pregnancy. He consulted Evangeline about everything, whether to plant corn or wheat, whether to buy another milk cow, whether to hire additional help. He treated her like a partner rather than a delicate ornament. Their son was born on a blazing hot day in July 1888, arriving with a lusty wail. He had Theodore's dark hair and Evangeline's stubborn chin. "What will you call him?" Beatrice asked. "Dillard," Evangeline said. "I think he looks like a dillard." "Dillard Blackwood," Theodore repeated. "I like it." 5 years later, Evangeline stood on the front porch watching her children play. Dillard, now 4, was attempting to keep up with his older siblings. Their second son, Ulysses, toddled after them. The ranch had prospered under their joint management. Marcus had married and was building a house on the far section of property. Christopher worked alongside his father. The 3 youngest called Evangeline Mama without prompting. One evening, Evangeline found an old photograph of Margaret. Instead of inadequacy, she felt only sympathy for the woman who'd been trapped in Theodore's rigid expectations. "What are you looking at?" Theodore asked, settling beside her. She showed him the photograph. "I was thinking about her, about how lonely she must have been." He studied his first wife's face, noting the sadness around her eyes. "She was beautiful," Evangeline observed without jealousy. "Not as beautiful as you." She was lovely, but she was also miserable, and neither of you knew how to fix it. He wrapped his arm around her. "I was so determined to control everything that I controlled the life right out of our marriage. I won't make that mistake again." "I won't let you," she replied with a smile. From inside came the sound of their children's laughter. The house that had once been a tomb now pulsed with life. "Do you ever regret answering my advertisement?" Theodore asked. Evangeline considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain it took to get here, but the destination?" She turned to kiss him softly. "Never." As darkness fell over the Nebraska prairie, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance above the grass. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but they would face them together as partners, rather than strangers playing roles they'd never auditioned for. The past had finally become what it should be, a foundation to build upon, not a prison to be trapped within. And their love, born from ashes and watered with tears, had grown into something strong enough to weather any storm. The lesson? You are not a replacement for anyone. You are not a ghost. You are gloriously, imperfectly, beautifully yourself. And that is more than enough. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. You don't have to disappear to be loved. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to become invisible. Sometimes love means fighting for the right to be seen as we truly are. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is permission to stop being perfect and start being real. What will you refuse to disappear for today?